Okay, I think this is our cue that we can get started. So for our final patient panel discussion today, I'd first like to start out by welcoming our speakers from this afternoon, Dr. Amanda Rhodes, who spoke about the psychological effects of living without a stomach. Thank you and welcome. And then also thank you to Rachel Lopez, a clinical research dietitian at the NIH, who spoke about nutrition after gastrectomy. I'm fortunate to work with both of them. And then before we get to questions, I'd like to welcome our patient panelists, and I'm going to list all of them. Colt Blunt, Jessica Sasser-Jackson, who I think we have by audio only, Kelly Brown, Lisa Bartashevitz, did I get it?
Yep, good job.
And Melanie Kirk, who is in a warm place that we all wish we also were. So all of these guys have in common that they've had gastrectomy for gastric cancer. So thanks everyone for joining us. It's now time to start off with some questions. And so as we start to get the questions in, I'm going to start with a few of my own. And the first thing I wanted to start off with was Dr. Rhodes, I thought, gave a really just phenomenal talk. And, you know, there were a couple slides that caught me. And I think one of them, just the visual of highlighting some of the things that patients go through after gastrectomy, you know, fatigue, nausea, pain or discomfort, physical function, things like that. And you went on to talk about a meaningful life and the importance of psychosocial support. Can I ask you first, Dr. Rhodes, to comment on maybe the spectrum of psychosocial support, and then we can maybe go to some of our patients and talk about how they approach this themselves, whether or not they approached it preoperatively, postoperatively, et cetera.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so in terms of spectrum, you can get this in your oh, I'm getting some feedback. Is anyone else getting feedback? Okay.
Yeah, why don't we'll all go on mute while you talk, maybe.
Okay, good. So lots of different levels of care you can get. You can get it within your household, right? Family support, friend support. There's a couple different resources in terms of self-help books. Anything online. You can work individually with a licensed psychologist or a mental health provider. You can do that at a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever you need. And then there's like lots of more support. There's groups. You can go more than once a week. You can go every day. So whatever really is your need. So whatever the individual need is for the amount is varied, and there's pretty much every level of care that you could possibly want. What do you all think?
Yeah, why don't we go? Maybe I'm gonna go clockwise on the screen. So Lisa, you wanna any comments you want to make maybe about kind of the value of psychosocial support after gastrectomy?
Yeah, definitely. I'm lucky. I have a really great support system in my household. My husband has been through this whole thing with me, the whole journey, and it's just been such a roller coaster the whole time. I'm a stage 4 stomach cancer survivor, and I was supposed to have a gastrectomy in June originally, and 4 days before that, a PET scan showed progression. So we kind of had to deal with getting ready to like have that total gastrectomy, since it is a life-changing operation, and then 4 days before kind of have the rug pulled out from under us, which was a huge roller coaster moment. And then suddenly it was like back on the table a few months later after I had a little bit more treatment. And so I don't know, it's just been such a roller coaster for us, but I am lucky to have my husband, and then all of my family is really close around here. So I would say that's my main support.
Yeah, and thanks for giving us the background of your story. I forgot to mention, please feel free to tell us kind of how you know, your story. So maybe Melanie, what about you? I know that you've got some obviously connections in terms of family too, and had some background experience with gastrectomy, so to speak.
Yeah, so we have in my family, I had years ago, I lost my mother, two aunts, two uncles, and my grandfather all passed from stomach cancer, and we didn't know what was going on. We just knew everybody was dying of stomach cancer. So we found out about we carry the CDH1 mutation. So my situation was a little bit different in that I didn't have any signs or symptoms of cancer. So when I started talking about having my stomach removed, it was like, what are you talking about in my family? Not in my immediate family. My husband was extremely supportive. My kids understood. But when we're talking about cousins and that type of thing, it was like, are you crazy? And then I did have a little bit of a background with some things that happened with my brother after he had his gastrectomy. Some things didn't go very well post-operatively. So a lot of people in our family were, thinking I was crazy because I didn't have any signs or symptoms of cancer. So I didn't have in my extended family, I didn't have a whole lot of support. But where I found a lot of support were, I think Amanda mentioned, the groups, support groups. So I quickly joined a Facebook group, and don't believe everything you read on the internet, or see on Facebook. But I found that group was extremely supportive and helpful and answering questions. That's how I found Dr. Davis. That's how I found the NIH, was through that Facebook group. People started talking about this study at the NIH, and I was like, let me check into that. And man, it was one of the best things I ever did. So for me, that support came, largely from my immediate family in terms of my husband and my children. My children I have older children, 21 now, 19 and 15. They were 3 years younger when all this started. But so that and the support groups have been very helpful for me.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Colt, what about your kind of, either preparation going into it, or again, maybe what you learned afterwards in terms of, the psychosocial support that Amanda talked about?
Sure. I was pretty recently separated and was living alone when I first got diagnosed, but I'm definitely one of these folks who generally does pretty well in stressful situations. Was very, very fortunate to be able to connect with a number of survivors who really kind of helped me through the process. And these are folks that I still kind of talk to until this day. So I feel like the whole lead up through all the treatment and the surgery and all that went really well. And then afterwards, it was like, okay, now I'm through this and everybody tells me I'm doing well, and I don't know how I'm supposed to survive. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. So I think for me, the back half of it, dealing with what it means to be a survivor, kind of seeing all of these other folks struggle with going through the same things that I went through, has been the biggest struggle for me. And I know that I've repeatedly turned to the survivors who have helped me out and process all of that with them. Friends and family, I mean, they've been supportive, but it's difficult for somebody who hasn't gone through it or really been that close to somebody who's gone through it to be that supportive. So for me, the survivors have been the best.
And I think I hear that quite a bit. And I think, whether it's, like the Facebook group or other groups, it doesn't matter. So Kelly Brown, can you tell us how did you come to this point in your life? And can you tell us a little bit of the background?
Sure, yeah. My sister was 36 years old, diagnosed with stage 4 gastric cancer. They didn't know what kind of cancer it was at first. It was stage 4. She passed away 52 days later. About 2 days before she passed, my mother had lobular breast cancer right at the age of 50. So about 2 days before she passed, her care team put it together and they were like, hey, there's this rare gene, the CDH1 gene, you should probably get tested and, to see if that may be what's going on in your family. Since your mother had a lobular breast cancer, your sister has the gastric cancer. So I got tested, found out I was positive for the gene. I'm not easily excited by I don't get easily excited about things like that. I work in healthcare, so I'm like, okay, that's fine, no big deal. So I started getting my EGDs done. They started to look different. So they were like, okay, we got to get your stomach out of there. And I thought, that's weird. Why would you do that? I'd never heard of that in my whole entire life. So no, thank you. Let me check that out. But I also didn't want to rile up my parents at this point. I did tell my mom that I was, CDH1 positive, but I didn't want to tell her what was to come next because everything happened so fast. So as soon as I got the results back, it was, okay, you got to go to this genetic counseling. You have to do They wanted me to go see behavioral health. I'm in the military. They wanted me to go see behavioral health. They wanted me to, it was so much, everything was happening at the same time. So I was just a little like, okay, so I waited a whole year before I even got my gastrectomy, because my first question was, okay, what's going to happen? You're saying I can live a normal life. What does that look like after that? You're saying I can live a normal life, but I need to know if I could be a soldier still. So I waited, because I was trying to, if you're saying I can live a normal life, then I want to make sure that I can also live a normal soldier life. I need to get promoted. I need to do these things. I need to set myself up. So that's what I was waiting for. I waited for a year, like I said. So 4 years ago, I had my gastrectomy, but I opted to not have any physical support, which I don't recommend that to anyone, but I did not want anyone kind of fussing over me and worrying about me. And I was like, I can do this myself. I was stationed in Killeen, Texas at the time at Fort Hood. I was living alone, and I did everything on my own, which it was hard. It was very, very hard. But like I said, I didn't want to, my parents were still very, wounded by my sister passing. And I didn't want them to be, every little thing, if I coughed, they were going to be like, oh God, and I just didn't want that. So I did, most of my support did come from Facebook groups. And like Melanie said, you can't believe everything on Facebook, but like everyone else said, that's the best people to kind of talk to and learn from, because you have no idea what is going to happen. You have no idea what you're walking into. You can read it here, you can research this, you can do that, but until you actually talk to, and even talking to other people, like you said, they don't know. People can talk to you about it, but no one's going to be like, oh yeah, well, I had my stomach removed and this is what happened to me. So you're going to have to talk to people that have gone through the same thing. And actually one of the very first people I talked to was Jessica. And she pointed me in the right direction for just about everything that I was looking for. So I was really thankful that I found the CDH1 group on Facebook. And that's where most of my support came from, and still does come from.
Well, you brought up something that I want to get to in a minute, so I wrote that down. But Jessica, I know you're on the line, and we can't see you, but that's okay. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe you can add to what Kelly was talking about in terms of the support that either you needed or you wanted, and kind of where you got it?
Sure. And I'm so sorry. I don't know where my webcam thing is, but maybe you guys are getting lucky not seeing me today. It's been a long day at work. So kind of like Kelly, I was diagnosed with the CDH1 mutation, and it was really just pure luck that I found out. My mother passed away when she was 38 from lobular breast cancer, but at no point did anyone ever really connect her breast cancer to like this mysterious stomach ailment that had plagued her family in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And so as I got a little bit older and I approached my 30s, I really wanted to understand my risk, and I was mainly concerned about breast cancer. And so I underwent the 32 gene panel, and when it came back with this CDH1 mutation, I was kind of floored. And my story, I feel, is a little bit different too, in that I had a really unique built-in support system through my process. My sister and I found out just a few weeks apart that we each carried the mutation and that we were each going to have to go through the gastrectomy process. And we actually did it together. We did it on the same day, just a few hours apart. And, we had a great deal of support from our family. I will never forget sitting in the geneticist's office, and she's just delivered this news and told us that, you're absolutely right. You're going to have your stomach removed. And my husband was the one who looked at me and was like, I'm so sorry. This is going to be horrible, but you have to do this. And like, I'm here for you the whole way. I'm here for you, whatever you need. But for me, I'm a very analytical person. I don't like surprises. I want to know what's coming. And so I immediately went into research mode, and I found, the CDH1 pages, the W's Dream pages, and I really started reaching out to other patients. And I still have a notebook full that I keep for when I get contacted by people, of just notes and tips and names and all of this information that they were able to give me. And, we sit here on the phone and we see each other, and, we've all talked to each other. But when we first got that news, it's very lonesome. You're just like, I don't know anyone that doesn't have their stomach. Like, I can't live like this. And so even though I had that support in my family and my friends, and I live in this great little community that's like Mayberry and wants to help everybody, but I needed that backup from people who had been there and who could tell me this is going to be okay. And I'll never forget one beautiful, sweet, precious lady I talked to named Marnie. The first thing she told me was, let me go ahead and tell you the best thing about life after a total gastrectomy is life. Like, this is going to give you a chance at life, a chance that so many people don't have, a chance your mother didn't have. And that's what you have to embrace. And it's just building that support system, even though we're all spread out across the world, really has been incredible, because there are things in my daily life that I experience that none of my friends can truly understand, right? Because they just don't have that physical barrier that I do. So, I just feel like you're saying that psychosocial support and just knowing that there are other people out there like you, oh my gosh, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, I think you guys are talking so much about how you can get that support in various ways, and one of the things that at least I know to be somewhat true, I think, is that you've just got to find it, and whether it's church, family, an organization like Debbie's Dream, or your doctor, a counselor, a therapist. You've got to find it, I think. One of the questions that came in the chat that I want to get to, and Colt's name is brought up because we know that Colt mentors a lot of folks, is this question about survivor's guilt. And Kelly kind of touched on this a little bit when she talked about her sister and her parents and all that. Maybe we'll start with Colt and then we can go around to anybody else. Is there survivor's guilt, or have you experienced it? And if so, how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, I'd say that's an understatement that it exists. I've been very fortunate enough to survive, at least so far, and to do well. And I think a product of being young is that I end up getting matched up with younger mentees. And invariably, I get matched up with folks who are young, recently married, have kids. And I'm single, I don't have kids. And that's very difficult for me because I see these folks who are often struggling and often not doing well. And I have to ask myself, why am I here? And this parent isn't. I would say that sometimes I cope pretty well with that. Sometimes I don't cope nearly as well. But the big thing for me is, if I'm here, I need to make something of it. I need to do something good with it. Otherwise, it's not worth it for me to have survived, in my mind. There was never an option of me just saying, like, okay, I'm done with cancer, going to close the door and go back to my normal life. Like, that just couldn't happen. So the one thing that I can do to honor the memory of those folks is to try to help as many people as possible navigate through it, to do as much as I can to advocate for research money, to do really anything I can to help the community. I will always experience guilt, and I'm always going to question why I'm still here, but I hope at the end of the day, I look back and say, okay, it was worth it. It was okay that I survived. I at least helped some folks along the way.
That's great. And Kelly, I'm just again curious because of your experience that you specifically mentioned about your sister and your parents and all that.
Yes, I do have a sense of survivor's guilt, only because my sister was 36, and at the time when she passed, I felt like she didn't get to live a life. She didn't get to, she wasn't married, she didn't have kids. But then I had to really think, like, she didn't want to have children, and she was like, whatever she did in her life, like, she did whatever she wanted to do. If she said, you know what, I want to feel the sunshine, and she wanted to feel the sunshine in Belize, she would get up and go and do that, and she could. So I had to come to terms with, she did have a good life, as far as that is concerned, but I felt very terrible that she did not have the same opportunity and option that I had. And by that time, it was too late for her anyway, because it had spread so much. And I know that my mother feels also very terrible because she had lobular breast cancer and she survived. And then her child gets stage 4 gastric cancer, does not survive. And my mother's cousin also on a Tuesday, went to work, had a bowel movement, there was blood. Thursday, he was gone. And it was from gastric cancer. And no one knew this. And it was that fast. And so, my mom feels terrible. And for a while, she just kept saying, I gave you this. I gave you this. And I said, well, you didn't give us, I mean, technically, right? But you did not. It wasn't a choice. She wasn't like, oh, what do I have in this bag that I can give my kids? CDH1. There you go. It's not. It wasn't that way. And that's how she was like it was. She was saying it as if it was an option. And then I kept trying to explain to her, well, it didn't come from you. It came from somewhere, But no one gave this to us. It's just something that was there. And but I know my mom feels very terrible, and I feel terrible because I would have, liked for my sister to have the same option. But like Colt was saying, I promised that as long as I am able to, I will do whatever I can to advocate and to bring awareness and to let people know about this so that it's not, it's for nothing. I was walking around with, stage 1B and had no idea. I didn't know, and that's like with everybody. There was no signs, no symptoms. My sister had no signs, no symptoms. And so it was around Christmas time, but so many things, no one could figure out what it was. And then March, she was gone, and so I'm just promised to do, everything that I can do for me, for my kids, for awareness sake, so that, we can do what we can. But the survivor's guilt is always going to be there, that I didn't, my sister we were only 14 months apart. So there wasn't, at that time, I did not know a day without my sister until then. So it's rough some days, and some days I'm like, no, I got this. But some days it's pretty rough.
And Dr. Rhodes, can you, I think sometimes it's important to acknowledge that these, things that Kelly's describing or Colt's describing, this is expected. These are normal kind of feelings that people would experience in this situation. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great opportunity to just mention some self-compassion work. And that does not mean self-pity by any means. It's more self-kindness and being kind to the inevitable feelings that show up in these situations that we can't control. And one of those being guilt or shame, or sometimes regret, deep sadness, grief. And what would you say to a close friend if they were experiencing survivor's guilt, and what that close friend might say to you? And then can we be kind to ourselves and bring that same perspective into kind of loving and holding ourselves and our experiences more gently? Because if you looked around, every person was kind of saying, oh yeah, I experienced that too, right? So if every single other patient on this panel is experiencing that, can we as a community kind of give that love to one another as something that just comes up and being kind about it?
Yeah, that's excellent. And I feel bad for kind of switching gears a little bit, but there's questions popping up in the thing that I want to get to. One of the questions is somebody, Julie asks, she had a partial gastrectomy in March for stage 1 gastric cancer, then another instance of stage 1 in December, and then had a total gastrectomy 2 weeks ago. Should I be tested? We don't have a genetic counselor on the panel this afternoon. We had one this morning. What I would say is yes, especially depending on your age, but it sounds like, listen, genetic testing these days is widely available. I think, you have to, in my estimation, go talk to a genetic counselor. But I think just remember that while there may be something going on, a genetic test may not show it, meaning genetic tests only look for the things that we know about. And there's so much that we don't know about, but that's a quick answer there. Kelly, don't let me forget, in a little while, we'll get back to you. Somebody had a question about support through the VA or the Veterans Administration hospitals. But what I want to talk about is somebody asked earlier on about biggest adjustments or hurdles post-operatively. And we've got Rachel Lopez on here. And I usually tell people that because I'm a surgeon, that, the surgery part's, pretty straightforward, but the part afterwards, life afterwards, I think is the harder part. Now, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but in some ways, recovering from surgery, you can do that, but 3-4 months later, you're healed from the surgery, but life is different. And so my question to Rachel, and then we can go around and talk to people about what they thought the biggest hurdles were, is Rachel, what kinds of questions do you think patients should be asking when they sit down, hopefully with a dietitian preoperatively, like going into this? What do you think people should ask that maybe they aren't asking based on your experience?
Sure. So my number one recommendation would be to ask what type of monitoring and support they're going to get after the surgery. As we've already discussed, support is the biggest need. This is not a surgery you recover from in a day, a week, or a month, or sometimes even a year, and just get back to a normal life. It really takes a team of people to help you recover from the surgery and to make sure you're going to have that team and access to that team after the surgery. Working at NIH, I'm extremely grateful that we are not insurance-based, so I don't have to worry about billing or scheduling. If somebody's having a problem, they text me, they call me, they can reach out to me, and I help. I don't have to worry about the paperwork and the administrative piece of that, and I'm very grateful for that I can just be on the end of the line to help, because it's oftentimes problems come up that shouldn't wait for your 3-month follow-up or your 6-month follow-up. Also making sure that you're getting counseling on what life looks like after the surgery, so you can start mentally preparing, physically preparing, practicing for what life looks like afterwards. Because these are big changes that shouldn't be surprises when you wake up from surgery that, oh, I have to do what now? I have to eat how often? I have to look at labels every time. I have to choose that's not a time to learn new things when you're recovering from the surgery. You have anesthesia in your system. That should be a review of information, but information that you've received in the past. Also making sure that you're going to have monitoring for vitamin levels, because the nutrition aspect of this afterwards, it's not just the number on the scale, your weight that we're looking at. We're looking at a lot of numbers, including your micronutrient levels, because if your iron is off, if your B12 is off, if you're not getting the right calcium, you're going to be having consequences that we can prevent for the most part, or that we can treat, but they shouldn't go unmonitored.
So you know, I guess I'll just go to like Lisa. You know, because people I think are really interested in, and I think this is part of that kind of support aspect. But for instance, what do you think some of the biggest hurdles for you were, you know, let's say after surgery?
Yeah, it was nice. I talked with a lot of different people, Colt being one of them, before my surgery, just to kind of get prepared. Like Rachel touched on, you don't want to be learning it right after what to be expecting. So I felt like I was really able to connect with a lot of people before, just to be as prepared as I possibly could. And then coming home, I mean, everyone is so different, I feel like, when they come home from it, but I had a feeding tube for about 8 weeks, and right away, one of my biggest issues was that I just felt so full from my feeding tube that it was so hard to force myself to eat, and it was like this vicious cycle that I was in. So luckily I switched to a different formula, and it really helped. And slowly but surely I just was able to add in more foods and test out different things. I've been pretty lucky. So my TG was in November of 2021. So I'm pretty recent still. So definitely learning. But for me personally, I found out like smoothies and protein shakes just like do not agree with me, which is unfortunate, because I want to get enough fluids and enough calories, and really I can't take those things together. So for me, it's basically every hour I need to be drinking something, or I need to be eating something, and it's just a constant thing for now until I can kind of increase what I can eat at one time, or find more calorie dense things to have. But it's definitely a process. And then you add in, I started back at work 3 weeks ago. I have a 3-year-old son. And so like trying to keep me top of mind, which has never been the case, it has probably been the biggest struggle I've had, is that I consciously need to think that I need to eat all the time.
Yeah, it's a lot of, I tell people you're expending a lot of mental energy, right? You're not doing a lot of physical like work, but it's mental energy that can drain you the same way that physical activity would drain you. And I'm curious, Jessica, if you could, did Jessica fall off? No, Jessica, I think Jessica can't. Okay, so Jessica went away. Kelly, no, I mean Melanie. Well, I'm trying to do the circle. So Melanie, what were some of your biggest struggles? And I know, Melanie, that you're a positive kind of person, but tell us like it really is. Tell us what the struggles were for you.
Yeah, early on, I would say fatigue was like the big thing. I mean, it was just because I think you're just not getting the calories, and you're just seeing the weight drop off so fast. So just being so tired and just having to tell myself, okay, it's okay to take a nap. That's not a bad thing. So, you get halfway through the day and go take a nap, and that's all right. So not being hard on myself. But to this day, oh my gosh, thank God, literally, for Rachel. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Because to this day, I mean, I struggle. I've never been a real disciplined eater before surgery, and unfortunately still not as disciplined as I probably should be after surgery. But just, really being able to, understand what I need to be eating, when I need to be eating, how I need to be eating. I still struggle with that. Like for me, Rachel knows this, I have a huge sweet tooth. We talk about that every time I come in. And so, I have to be careful with my sugar intake. And even just things like I might be able to eat a half a cookie, but the problem is if I eat the half a cookie, then I don't want to eat, the right stuff, the stuff that's good for me that I need to be eating. So just, balancing that, okay, allowing myself a treat here or there, but balancing that with, the nutritional intake that I know my body needs, so I still struggle with that. I'm 3 years out. I'll be 3 years out in April. And I still struggle with the discipline of the eating. It's gotten a lot better. And I'm just, like I said, I'm so thankful for Rachel because every time, if I have a question about, I just send her a picture of the label, and she'll tell me, okay, you want to be careful of this or look for that, and so I'm thankful for her. But that's probably been, I'd say, one of the biggest challenges is just becoming more disciplined about eating and understanding like my cues, because obviously I don't have a stomach, so my stomach doesn't growl when I'm hungry. So sometimes I may go too long without eating, and then everything that comes on a commercial on TV looks good, and I'm like, why does everything look good? This pizza looks good. Oh, the hamburger looks good. Oh, and I'm like, oh, because I haven't eaten, So just understanding my new body cues and things, the cues that my body give me that they didn't give me, that were different before I had surgery. So
that's great. I knew you had the sweet tooth problem. Kelly, can you tell us a little bit though? Also, too, I know that sometimes transitioning back to, let's say, real life work, your social life, whatever, were there hurdles there that were anticipated or unanticipated? Like, I've heard people talk about just going back to work can be difficult for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. Going back to work, to me, I went back to work 8 weeks after my surgery. And looking back on it, I probably could have waited a little longer, but I was ready to go. I have to go, like being in the military, I think we don't allow ourselves most of the time, like proper time to really get your body and life back together before you're like, okay, I gotta go. And they're telling you, okay, you gotta go. So I went right back to work 8 weeks. I'm a respiratory therapist. So I was doing 12-hour shifts. I went back 12 hours at night. So one of the biggest hurdles for me was eating, sleeping, drinking properly. I was still at that time, like sometimes just taking a shower was wiping me out. And then coming off of, 3 or 4 12s in a row, it would take me 2 days to get back to normal or to whatever normal at that time was, because I was so tired. I could not, like, if you don't rest, your body will do it for you at some point. And my body was like, listen, lady, this is it. Like, you're doing too much. But I was like, nope, I have to. But at the same time, I was still expected to PT. I was still expected to go to the range. I was still expected to do normal military, everyday military things, which to me were a little out of my normal at that time, but I didn't have a choice. It was either that or they were going to find a reason to put me out. So I had to do what I had to do. So it was probably about 8 months after my surgery that they were like, hey, listen, wait a minute. Did you just get your stomach removed? Because I had my stomach removed at MD Anderson. So by the time everything, by the time they got my records from there and there, they were like, whoa, you can't be here like that. You got to go. And I was like, but why? Because I've been at work for 8 months already, And so they were like, oh, well, you got to do a PT test. So I woke up the next morning. I went to go do a PT test. And I mean, surprisingly, I scored higher, probably because I was 60 pounds lighter at that point. You can kind of do anything at that point, and I'm a little older. So the standards were a little, I wasn't having to do the same thing as a 21-year-old. So I was 60 pounds lighter and an old lady at this point. But it was hard. It was hard for me. And even, there's some schools that I've been to, like since then, I'm 4 years out now, this month, January, it was 4 years. And there's schools that I've been to that I was afraid, like, we got to ruck, we got to do this. And I'm like, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I've eaten enough today to go on how many ever miles of a ruck with however much weight on my back. So I've done these things and I've struggled at doing these things. But afterwards, like, I'm looking around, I'm like, well, I did this without a stomach. And, a lot of people don't know, and so in my mind, I've had these little small victories, like, yes, I just did that with no stomach, and and nobody knows. But some of these things are so hard. They're very, very hard. Even now, 4 years later, I was working in burn, and that was like, that will wear you out even if you do have a stomach, even if you are healthy, like the amount of dehydration that can happen because of the patient's room being so hot, the showers, you have to sometimes it's 2 to 4 hours in the shower with the patient. And that's like being in a sauna. You're fully dressed, fully everything. And sometimes there's no time to rest. So between these shifts and all this stuff, I still have my Army responsibilities that I have to do. And I've been able to do it. It has not been, every day was not Reese's, it was my favorite. I love Reese's too. But every day was not, a good day. But I count it as a good day because I was able to get through it and do it. But it has been, there has been times where I've slept for 3 days. I just couldn't make it anymore. But in my mind, I'm like, well, I did it though, and I don't know, sometimes I don't know how healthy that thinking is, because I know there's been times where I've pushed and pushed and pushed and maybe shouldn't have, have to rest a little bit, but I've done it, and it's been a struggle. It's a struggle, but it can be done.
Well, I think what you guys are demonstrating is that it can be done, and I think that shows your determination and courage to go through all of this. The one thing that you said in the beginning that struck me, though, is you said, man, the things that were really tough in the beginning were eating and drinking and sleeping. And I thought, well, that's life. Eating and drinking and sleeping, those are critical to living. So it's almost like you're saying living was tough for a while after surgery.
Yeah,
so I think you guys can succeed, and you do succeed, but we have to acknowledge how difficult it is. And I do want to move on. I want to ask Jessica a question. I do want to move on real quick. One person asked, and this is totally random, but I'm putting it in here because it's a short question. Would you advise total gastrectomy for a 64-year-old with CDH1? There are questionable deaths in the family, but the family is very small. I do want to comment on this. Age is but a number. However, as you get older, gastrectomy, I think, does get a little harder, as everything does in life, right? I can't pull all-nighters anymore. So I think this is a question I'm happy to address offline. If you want to contact me directly, it doesn't matter. You can email me anytime. I think my email is plastered on bathroom walls across the United States. So email me anytime. I do want to ask Jessica, because she logged back in, is somebody asked, did having a total gastrectomy affect relationships with your friends? I found that people treated me differently or even avoided me. Jessica, can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, I will say my personal experience was no, it did not affect my relationship with friends. I think at first everyone kind of did treat me with kid gloves. They didn't really know what to say. They didn't know, as I was struggling. And I had a really bad setback about 10 months after my initial gastrectomy. And so I went through a really hard period. And I think people kind of struggled with what to say and what the appropriate thing to do was. But I've also reached a point now, I started a new job 2 years after my gastrectomy, and no one there even knew for almost a year. I reached that point where I just really couldn't, they just thought I was that person who ate really small meals to be healthy. But most of my friends were super supportive still to this day, super supportive. They kind of understand, if I ever say, I'm not going to go, I'm kind of having a bad belly day, they're really understanding of that. And I think the key too is just kind of having that open communication. I know my closest friends going into it, a lot of them, some of them went to appointments with me. Some of them sat on calls with me as I was talking to doctors and kind of asking questions because they wanted to know how to support me. And I'm incredibly lucky that I just have a very, very close group of friends, I think, who were never going to, exclude me or act weird around me because of, and now everybody makes jokes. For example, I can have a few glasses of wine now and it, I'll feel it really quick and then 10 minutes later I'm fine. So we'll all go out and it'll be like, Jessica's going to be the DD. Just give her 10 minutes, let her go to the bathroom and she's fine. So I think that's been my experience. And I'm so sorry if somebody's had another experience other than that. And sometimes I don't think it's that people are trying to be hurtful or trying to exclude you. Sometimes people genuinely just don't know what to say or what the right thing to do is, and they don't want to hurt you.
Yeah, and I noticed Lisa was nodding her head a little bit. Lisa, what's your experience then?
Yeah, I would say I definitely have both ends of the spectrum that have really happened. I've had some really good friends that have, I feel become even better friends because they've been there for me and my family through everything. Like Jessica was saying, just coming to some of the appointments with me, and just doing anything they can to help. But I have had some of those friends that they just don't know how to act or what to say or what to do. And there's one that really sticks out in my mind is I've had a friend that will tell another friend oh, I hope she's doing really well and I miss talking to her, and another friend will just say just text her, just reach out to her, you should, you guys were friends, why aren't you talking to her? So I definitely have seen both ends of the spectrum, and I don't think it's meant to be hurtful in any way. I just think that people don't exactly know what to say.
Well, Dr. Rhodes, do you have any advice? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, one thing that if you watch my talk, I mentioned briefly that sometimes there's a sense of loss in our own patients of the life or the eating behaviors that we had pre-gastrectomy, but that certainly happens, and I've seen it with our close family members because their relationship, maybe you were, the Friday night, have a bottle of wine and gossip type relationship, or you were the running buddy relationship. And so post gastrectomy, that relationship changes. And so sometimes our friendships, they're experiencing a sense of loss of just the dynamic within the relationship. So open communication, obviously, is really important, and understanding both their needs in the relationship and your needs and how that might change, because it certainly is changing. And so bringing it to the surface and just acknowledging the ways in which the dynamics have changed because your life has changed is really important.
That's a great point. And I do recommend watching Dr. Rhodes' talk again. There was another comment. This wasn't a question, it was a comment. And I think it speaks a little bit to the adequacy of support that you guys need, whether it's friends, families, but also from the people taking care of you. And this is Melanie V says to Rachel Lopez, I can't thank you enough for the slides that you presented. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups and I have shared them with them all. I took pictures of the slides and shared them. The one thing that no one mentions is that it all takes time. Months and even a year post-op, I was still learning what I could eat. I am now 13 years out, and there are still times that I go through dumping or sugar drops. I just wish that someone would have told me that it takes time. And I think this speaks a little bit to having the support of people like you. Colt mentioned that, right? People, right? I've never jumped out of an airplane, so I can't tell you what it's like to jump out of an airplane. Only somebody that's done that can, and then you can kind of share that experience. Melanie did say one other thing. She says, first of all, thank you. The NCI is launching a group. It's a working group on gastric and esophageal cancer research. They want to develop a strategic plan. If you could see one thing done to help in our fight, what would it be? I will tell you that I'm part of that group, not just because I work at the NCI, but hopefully because I don't know, I have something to offer. I think that, you know, one of the reasons I study CDH1 is because I think that CDH1 and some of the unique aspects of why some of you guys are at risk for developing stomach cancer is going to help us understand stomach cancer in general. And some of the biggest pushes right now in cancer research are early detection and prevention. And if you think about it, the CDH1 thing is a poster child for early detection and prevention. And so one of the things, and when I'm participating in this group, is talking about what I think is the importance of early detection and prevention in gastric and esophageal cancers. Obviously, some big things that we can do, let's say in our society, is reducing tobacco use and things like that. Those are the easy things we can do. But there are other things, obviously, that we don't quite understand about gastric cancer and why it develops. And I think, again, the CDH1 work is going to help us in that regard. So hopefully that's a short answer to a rather complicated or long question. I do want to go back to Kelly, because Kelly has experience with the Veterans Administration. And I will comment that I've worked in VA hospitals. I think they have a lot to offer. But I think somebody asked a question about what kind of support you got through the VA, and because it sounds like they're also work or are affiliated with the VA, and I think they wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So I haven't been to the VA because I'm still active duty, so I still, yeah. But I've been offered.
Did you ever rely on like the like military stuff?
So I've been offered behavioral health. I'm also followed. Not only am I followed by nutrition at MD Anderson, but I'm followed by nutrition here. I'm at Fort Sam currently. So all the services are still available to me. So whatever I need, I can get from either MD Anderson, where I had my surgery, or from the military facility where I'm located. But yeah, there's not. I've not been, turned away from any services that if I was to need them. But I'm sure retirees and things like that, they can get those services through the VA.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I apologize too. I know you had mentioned that you were still active. So I'll just comment real quickly, because we're across the street from Walter Reed, which is the National Military Medical Center. But in terms of the VA or the military system, I tell people always the same thing. If you've got stomach cancer, you want to be treated by people who do this on a regular basis. So the bigger military centers, the bigger VAs are obviously going to have more experience than others. NIH is similar to, let's say, the VA system or the military system, because in many ways it's similar because it's federally run and you don't get charged for care. So just like the VA system, you don't get a bill. So anybody that's in the VA system or in the military system that's active duty, there's a lot of similarities with what we do at the NIH. So let me just scroll through any of the other questions that I may have missed. We've got about 5 minutes left. Okay, maybe I'll ask somebody. Rachel, this is a good question for Rachel. Suggestions or recommendations for things like protein drinks or caloric supplements, whether it's for cancer patients with cancer or after gastrectomy, I suppose, because it wasn't totally clear on there, but I think it's a good question.
So after total gastrectomy, the protein drinks can be extremely helpful because, as Lisa pointed out, you're looking for hydration and the calories. So Lisa, I'm sorry to hear they haven't been working for you yet. again, I have no affiliations with specific brands, but brands that tend to work well for people who we see here that are pre-made are things like Premier Protein and the Core Power drinks that are made by Fairlife. Both of them don't have any added sugar and are high protein. I also work with people to develop recipes for homemade protein drinks using ingredients that they tolerate well and flavors that they enjoy, because you can make a protein drink at home with very simple ingredients and just throw some things in a blender. And that is oftentimes better tolerated than some of the pre-made products that have a lot of artificial ingredients in them, because some people are sensitive to even the artificial sugar substitutes that don't cause dumping but cause other symptoms for certain people. For someone who does not have to necessarily avoid added sugars for the purposes of dumping syndrome, someone who still has their stomach, there are a lot of pre-made products on the market as well as homemade recipes. There's also a product that I recommend often that's not anybody's favorite, but it's called Benecalorie. It's like a oil with protein in it that doesn't have a flavor to it. So each 1.5 ounces has 330 calories in it. So you get a lot of bang for your buck. When you open the package, it looks like a cloudy oil and doesn't look like something you want to drink. It isn't something you should drink. It's something you should add to other foods or to fluids. Preferably somebody in your household adds it so you don't even know it's in the product. But the goal is to mix it in so that you don't know it's there, but you're getting more calories and protein. So that would be my short and sweet recommendations.
That's great. I like it. Somebody's just going to sneak it in for you. I just can't. That makes me laugh. I don't see any other. I hope I didn't miss any questions in the chat. Let me just double check. We asked that about, how about any tips on trying to keep weight on? Now, I'm not going to ask Rachel, but I'll ask whether it's, well, maybe we'll go back to Melanie or Jessica, because everybody loses weight after gastrectomy, right? By definition, you're going to, because we're taking out a big pouch that holds food, and then there's a little bit of a malabsorption aspect of the operation. So let's go to Melanie first, because I know you also do some running, which I never quite understand why people want to go out and run when you could easily drive a car or something. But Melanie, how do you answer questions about how keeping weight on after gastrectomy?
Yeah, the big thing for me was finding a go-to, food, something that worked for me, that I knew no matter what, especially early on. I've been fortunate. My recovery has been pretty good. And at this point, I can eat pretty much anything I want to eat. But early on, it was a little harder. And so it was finding something that, that was my go-to, where, if I just would have, honestly might be 2 or 3 weeks where I just didn't feel like eating, didn't want anything. And Rachel's voice would just be in my head, the way your body is going to recover is by giving it food. You're going to feel better the more you feed it and the more you let it be able to learn. That's how you're going to get better. So I'm like, okay, what is a go-to that even when I just really don't want to eat, I can do it? And so for me, and it varies from person to person, but for me, it was Olive Garden fettuccine Alfredo. It was high in calories, and it was good. So I would go, and the great thing was they have a kids meal for $5.99, and I could eat on that, for 2 days on the kids meal. So So it was just, for me, that was the big thing, was finding, something that I could use as a go-to. I also did good if I didn't want to spend money. Pastas were always good for me. So like I could make turkey spaghetti here at home. The turkey had a lot of protein in it, and, and it was good. And I just would nibble on that throughout the day, even if I didn't want to. So that's the big thing I would say, is just, work to find something, and it is work, but work to find something that can be a go-to for you in those times that you just don't want to eat.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the breadsticks dipped in the Alfredo sauce at Olive Garden. In the last minute or so we have, Jessica, any thoughts on keeping weight on from your perspective, Jessica?
Yeah, so for me, it really, especially early on, it was really that constant grazing. Like eating felt like a chore. There were times I did not want to do it, but I lived and died by this timer that I would set. And every hour I was eating or drinking and back and forth and back and forth. And kind of like Melanie said, finding things that worked. And it's funny that you said pasta. That was my go-to. And sometimes I would even do just plain spaghetti noodles with a little bit of butter and Parmesan cheese. And that would just be kind of I would snack. I would have a few ounces of that. Protein drinks. And Lisa, you were saying you had a hard time with them. But I would open one up in the morning, and when it was my time to drink, I would drink so many ounces of like water with lemon or something in it, because that's the other weird thing. Plain water is very hard to drink. But I would have like 3 or 4 ounces of that, and then I would take, several sips of my protein drink. And if I just did a little bit at a time, I found that I could get through, 1.5 a day. And that would give me a lot of extra protein. And then as I slowly got to be able to eat sweets, I would, have a Reese cup, or like the little kid size ones. I would try to put those in. And I'm lucky now in that, I'm almost at that point where I need to watch what I eat, because I could easily go up in weight. But it's just always been that, making sure that I have a routine and I have a schedule. And even when we travel, because I think I'm that exception. When I go on a trip, I lose weight because I get off my schedule. So it's just making sure that I live and die by that routine and that timer.
Well, I think those are great comments. And, I was just looking at the clock. I think we could keep talking for a long time. I want to thank Colt, Jessica, Kelly, Lisa, and Melanie, and then certainly Rachel and Dr. Amanda Rhodes. I think we touched on a lot of, important topics, and these are topics that you guys all know that we could sit and talk about for many more hours. So thanks to all our speakers today, and definitely to Debbie's Dream Foundation for putting this together. I thought it was amazing. I know, for one, if anybody has any questions, reach out to me anytime. It's jeremy.davis@nih.gov, or reach out to Debbie's Dream. They're a great resource. Check out their website. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. It was great seeing everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.